About the organization of a speech, we have different parts. The first is the opener. The opener is the very beginning when you first have to mention the topic, but before that, probably you have to mention some common areas, let's say, on the subject. By common areas, I mean, for example, you will have to establish, let's say, a common ground on which you're both standing on. Like telling them that, for example, okay, this is something that we both believe in, this is something that we both, for example, accept. By both, I mean you as the speaker and the audience. And then later on, you're going to mention the problem, the main thing that you would like to talk about. And then we have the second is the purpose. You will have to tell the audience why you are presenting them this speech. So you will have to clarify the speech to the audience. You know, in the first two, let's say, steps of this, in the first two parts of this organization, you will have to make it interesting enough. You will have to, let's say, create this necessity in their mind to, let's say, want to follow with the rest of the speech. This is so important. You will have to catch their attention. It's important. And the thing is, at this very beginning step, it's so important not to tell them the final message. It is so important not to tell them what exactly you would like to achieve at the end, okay? Because sometimes people have this strong belief in something, so it's extremely difficult to get them to change their idea. It's extremely difficult to get them to agree with something. So if you tell them the final message, they mentally stand against what you're, let's say, arguing, what you're talking about. And it is something mental, you know. They normally guard against what you're going to tell them. So they will no longer, let's say, listen to you. All they do is probably only hear you. So you will have to get them to listen to you rather than simply hearing you. This is important. And we have the body in which we express the main message. We, let's say, talk about the main problem. We talk about, for example, the main disagreement. We talk about anything that, let's say, we have to tell them. We have the summary. In the summary, we again have a review of the important points that have been discussed earlier. And finally, we have the concluding remarks, the final remarks. The most important part of the concluding remarks is, let's say, again, to tell them why you believe, for example, a certain action should or should not be taken. You tell them again, based on all the points that you've discussed before in the body of the presentation, why you believe that, for example, they have to change their opinion about something. You know, you will have to remind it to the audience. This is what we mean by the concluding remark, which is the last part of a persuasive speech. Well, about the language, which is very important. I mean, good speakers are also, very good at using words. They have, let's say, a good command of vocabulary. They know how to, for example, use language appropriately. They know how to use resonant words to, let's say, benefit them the most. So, in talking about adjectives and adverbs, normally it is the adjectives and adverbs that provokes feelings and emotions. When we discuss about, let's say, generally speaking, two types of texts, like, for example, as being subjective or objective, this is something that you're already familiar with. We say something that makes text or speech subjective is the use of adjectives and adverbs. When we're talking about something scientific here, there is no way for emotion. So that is why in scientific texts we normally have only nouns and verbs. But when we talk about, let's say, literary texts, because they, let's say, have to do with people's feelings, people's emotions and ideas, we have lots of adjectives and lots of adverbs and other literary devices, some of which are going to be mentioned later in the following slide, in the last slide. So you will have to be able to, let's say, use good adjectives and adverbs. Adjectives, let's say, can provoke feelings. They can arouse certain feelings, and adverbs are also used to strengthen the adjectives. Of course, adverbs normally modify the verbs, but we can also use them to strengthen the adjectives. Like, for example, when we say something is uh, really important. We use this really as an adverb to strengthen the adjectives that we have, the adjective that we have used. So that is why you'd better use strong adjectives rather than some simple adjectives. For example, by strong adjectives we mean, strong adjectives are those that have the idea of very in themselves, and that is why we normally do not use very with them. Like for example, I cannot say I am very exhausted. Normally, exhausted itself means very tired. Or for example, you can say starving, which means very hungry. So try to use these strong adjectives because the purpose is to try to arouse some certain feelings, and these feelings could later lead them to, let's say, take some certain actions. About the verbs, you also have to use strong verbs. You will need to, especially when the purpose of the speech is to, let's say, actuate, is to get the audience to do something, you'd better use action verbs rather than state verbs. Well, you know the difference between state verbs. State verbs, like for example, verbs that refers to only some states. They do not refer to any actions. Like for example, when you say we like something, like be, let's say like believe. So instead of them, you'd better use action verbs because they are stronger and they can appeal. Strong, as you can see, you say strong action verbs appeal to pathos when you would like them to, let's say, change their opinion and to take an action against something, or to stop, let's say, doing something. We have similes. Simile is one of the literary devices. By simile we mean, let's say, comparing two things to highlight the similarities between these two things. But why do we do that? Because sometimes there are some certain things that are already familiar to the audience. When we assimilate something to, for example, this familiar thing, that the audience can easily, let's say, understand the new subject or the new issue. So simile could be used, let's say, professionally, could be used effectively to, let's say, convince the audience. And to express the simile, we normally use two words. One is as and one is like. We say, for example, like somebody, like something. Or for example, as, as a speaker, as a leader, as a strong, for example, idea. Then, we use these two words to, let's say, express the similes. Numerous examples with the language have been provided in the pamphlet that has been uploaded, and you are kindly expected to check all these, let's say, examples, all these useful expressions in the pamphlet, as there is no way, let's say, mentioning all of them here in the slides. So we have some other things that we can apply that we can use to be more persuasive. One of them is cliches. So, cliches are the things, the expressions that have been overused, that have been used over and over. So since they've been used too many times, they have kind of lost their effectiveness. Still, if you are able to use them effectively, sometimes cliches can work. Sometimes cliches can help you to persuade or to be, let's say, more convincing. We also have rhetorical questions. These are the type of questions that we ask, but they're not intended, let's say, to elicit any answers. We do not expect, let's say, an answer. Like, for example, when you say, for example, don't you think we should stop doing this? Actually here, you are asking somebody to stop doing something. You're not actually asking them a question. You do not expect an answer. So these are called rhetorical questions. So these rhetorical questions can, mentally, can unconsciously affect, let's say, the reader or the audience. We have alliteration, which is again another literary device. Alliteration is the repetition of, for example, a certain sound that could be used at the beginning, but not necessarily at the beginning. Normally we say at the beginning of words, but it's not about being convincing. Alliteration in a persuasive speech is used to add, let's say, to the attractiveness of the language that is used. That is, let's say, why we can also use alliteration. Or as it's been mentioned, we say it can make your speech catchy, interesting, and attractive. And we finally have the repetition. We sometimes repeat something to strengthen something.